me the thumbs up when you start, brother. Thank you. Hi everybody, my name is Ross Cessna. I'm an alcoholic addict and I have bipolar disorder, a borderline personality disorder, and I can't think of the other one right now because I'm a little bit nervous. But if anybody would like to join me in the Serenity Prayer, I'm going to do this for me to get me out of the way so I can deliver my message to you easier. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. For me, life is about perception. I mean, you may be out there sometime and you may ask someone, how high are you? And they misunderstand and respond, no, officer, it's hi, how are you? If no one told you today, I love all of you, I respect you, and I appreciate the positivity you contribute to the world as a human and within your profession. My first memory as a child was standing on the porch outside of my parents' farmhouse looking at a clawfoot tub that was made into a goldfish pond. It was placid, tranquil, and serene. I turned around and faced away from the tub, and then trust fell into it, instantly disturbing the serenity with the turbulence of my own impulsivity. This would soon become the analogy of my life for years to come. Fairly early on in my life, my aunt committed suicide, and that was when I got my first concept of death. And I remember being 6 years old and walking on a frozen pond and thinking, after I died, everything would fade away and it would be cold blackness. And I don't think that's the normal for 6-year-olds to probably think those things that deeply. And then shortly after that, my parents divorced around when I was in 2nd grade. And my response to that was, I didn't even respond emotionally because I didn't understand what was going on. I disassociated at that point because I couldn't relate to those things. Shortly after that, my dad remarried, and one of the first instances I had in that situation from not getting attention was running away. And I ran away in the middle of winter into a field that was by my house, and I found this little box and I put a rug over it, and then I found a little pot, basically a pot to piss in, pardon my language, but and I sat out there for 2 or 3 hours in the winter, just freezing, until I got so cold that I went back into my house. I was probably 7 or 8 then. And then I remember being in 4th or 5th grade, and just every night I would have anxiety about how could I be better, how could I be smarter, how could I be funnier, you know? And during those nights when I couldn't sleep with the anxiety, I started to vandalize things. I would sneak out of my house and I would slash tires, break windows, all sorts of things that somebody in 5th grade nobody should be doing those things to begin with, but certainly not someone in 5th grade. After that, in 6th grade, I had my first experience with the police when I was in class and I was pulled out of class, and I got caught for all the vandalism that I had done, which was a bad experience for me, being in 6th grade and being pulled out in that situation and not really being respected, I felt, and not having people understand that there was underlying issues. I was just treated as a number and a system, basically. It was my opinion at that time. After those experiences, I had my first experience with pot when I was probably in 7th grade. And nothing bad happened then. And I drank a little bit of alcohol here and there. Nothing bad really happened, and I wasn't getting caught with those things, and life pretty much progressed as it would for most other people, with the exception that I wasn't cultivating coping skills. I was isolating myself, and I was creating so much self-loathing and self-worthlessness in myself that nothing I ever did was good enough. I just could never live up to my own expectations of what I should be. And then my first intimate encounter with a lady was involving alcohol, and that would set a standard for how I would have to have those interactions for the rest of my life, because I was so uncomfortable with who I was and how I felt and how I related to people, because I couldn't have a good relationship with me, so I couldn't really have a good relationship with myself, because if you don't respect yourself, in my experience, you can't respect other people. And that was something I'm just learning recently. After that experience with the lady and the alcohol, I was caught. My dad caught me with pot. I had skipped school that week, and then I was at my mother's for visitation, my dad went through my things and he found my bowl, and he's like, I found your little pipe you smoke your drugs out of, which I thought was funny at the time because I'm like, nah, it's just a bowl. But then he put me in rehab at Neil Kennedy in Austintown. And I didn't really take it seriously necessarily. At that time, I did other things that wouldn't show up on drugs tests, like acid, ecstasy. I drank cough syrup at that time, because back then it was called robo-tripping. I don't know if people still do that, hopefully they don't, because that causes a lot of damage to your brain. And around that time, I started my first serious relationship with someone, and I had met her smoking weed and just doing drugs, and let me tell you, that was a match made in heaven, because it was, again, just such a turbulent, rocky relationship that was on the ins and outs and created so much more turmoil for myself that it was difficult to deal with. But I completed Neil Kennedy at that time without any issues, and that would be the summer going into my senior year is around when I finished. And then beginning of my senior year, I got caught with pot in school, and then I was ordered to go to rehab, and I got put in drug court, and it was very difficult for me to understand how I was treated that way, because it was my understanding that children are supposed to have their parents present when they're questioned in those situations, and neither in my first situation or the second one did that ever happen to me. And I had read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and those things, and all these things were counterintuitive to what I thought. So that really shaped my opinion of police for a long time, and thankfully I was able to have enough experiences to change those things, because those are individuals, they're not people as a whole, and they were just doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they did help me out in some ways. I was just too naive to understand it at the time. My next experience with the law, after completing drug court, which my last day of drug court, I smoked pot right before I went and graduated from drug court. And I skipped a little bit. When I was in drug court too, I continually got myself locked up because I wouldn't stop smoking pot, because for me it was the only way I could feel good. And I went as far as to have masking agents, fake urine, pretty much any way that I could get away with doing things and not getting in trouble, I did, because I didn't understand how I could be put in this situation when the only problem that I was having from it was the people that were putting me in these situations. And that was difficult for me to understand then. After that situation, I went on a vacation to Ocean City, Maryland, and I had brought a bunch of beer and a bunch of weed with me, and the cops got called because I was only 20 at that time. I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but they got me for underage consumption. Thankfully, they didn't look in my tent, but that was another interaction with the cop, and that was really the first cop that was decent to me and treated me like a person, in my opinion. Because when I was younger, it was like being scolded by somebody or being subhuman. It was how they treated me, and that really affected my psyche in lots of ways. During that time, I was still with the first girlfriend that I had, the serious one. We were always on the ins and outs, like I had said earlier. And when we finally kind of were done with everything, I started culinary school because I wanted to get away from this area. I wanted to get away from everybody that knew me. I wanted to have a new experience. I needed something different. And I was originally going to go to New Orleans to do my culinary externship. Oh, I skipped ahead again. Culinary school for me was basically like, I partied all the time. I would go to school in the morning, then I would go to work at the one restaurant I was working at, and restaurants are normally full of drugs and alcohol if anybody's ever worked in them. And then after that, I would normally go to the strip club, and then I would drink most of the night, and then I'd get up and go to school and continue that cycle. One of the mornings in culinary school, I almost got a DUI on my way to school because I was so hungover from the night before. I blew a .078 or whatever it would be, at 7:30 in the morning, and the only reason it was that low is because the guy didn't have a breathalyzer in his car at the time, and he had to drive me to the station. Had he had it with him, I probably would have gotten a DUI then. When I was done with the class portion of culinary school, I got to pick my externship, and that was where I was going to go to New Orleans, but Hurricane Katrina hit, so I couldn't go there. So I decided to go to Las Vegas because my father had moved out to Las Vegas. And at the time, I was really infatuated with the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and how they took that wild road trip from California to Vegas. So I actually planned a road trip similar to that from Ohio to Las Vegas. Now fortunately, I made it there safe. Nobody got hurt. I didn't get arrested. I destroyed my car in the process for driving 24 hours straight with my buddy. There was one point when we woke up somewhere in New Mexico. We didn't know how the car got where it was. We didn't remember who was driving last. The car was dead. It wouldn't start. And then I was trying for 2 or 3 hours to get somebody to jump my car. And nobody would jump my car because I had been on drugs for a couple days. My pupils were the size of quarters, and I later found out that I had a candy bar wrapper sticking out the side of my hat, so that it looked like, obviously I looked like a crazy person. And the only person that actually did give me a jump and got me going again was somebody who showed up with bald tires on his truck, and he was changing one of these bald beaten up tires and putting on another one. It was somebody that I would never expect anybody to help because all the people that were clean cut and were supposedly respectable people, they wouldn't give me the time of day. But this gentleman did, and then I asked him if I could buy him a soda or get him something to eat, or even give him some of the weed I had with me, and he's like, I don't smoke weed, I only do meth. And for me, it was a surreal experience to have somebody in that situation tell me that they did meth, because for me, meth was always bad people, because I had never had done it, and I still have never done it, and it blew my mind that all these people that were supposedly helpful, good people, just looked at me like I was trash, but this other person treated me like a human being. I still have a lot of respect for that person for helping me out in that situation. After I got done with that, and I finally made it to Las Vegas, I got kicked out of my dad's place shortly thereafter, or I should say I kicked myself out because he went through my bags and he found my weed. And I was just like, I'm 20-something years old, you're not going to go through my stuff. I'd rather be homeless than be treated like this. So this is the first time I ever really made myself homeless in that capacity, where I moved all of my things out of his house and left them on his driveway and was just like, I'm just gonna go find my own way, and like I'll come back and get my stuff whenever. Which obviously that was when my mental illness was displaying itself more prevalently, not that it wasn't already there earlier on in my life. But I still remember that. I thankfully have apologized to my dad and made amends to him, because the things I said were ridiculous to him, and it was a horrible situation. When I finally got settled into Vegas and actually saved up enough money, with the help of my mom actually sending me some money to get me out of being homeless, the position that I had went out there for my culinary externship was at Red Rock Station Casino on West Charleston Boulevard in Las Vegas. I don't know if anybody's been there, but it's by Red Rock Canyon. And I was on the opening staff at the Grand Cafe, so it was a pretty exciting experience to be 20-something years old working in a brand new restaurant in a brand new hotel in one of the most happening places in the world, really. And the thing is that situation isn't good for somebody who has mental illness and addiction issues, because my disease was just running rampant at that time, and my ego was so big. Because out of culinary school, I thought I was like Bobby Flay or somebody like that, and I could throw down with everybody. And I was just so arrogant, and nothing progressed fast enough for me to where I had been at my job for a certain amount of time, and I wanted the sous chef position more than anything, and they wouldn't give me the sous chef position. So Station Casinos owns a network of hotels in Las Vegas, and I was able to apply for other sous chef positions at other places. So I applied at Palace Station, and they have offered me the position, which it never really came to fruition of anything. And the chef, let me change that. It actually did come to where I was going to get the position there, but then the chef at Red Rock told me, stay here, I'll give you a better opportunity, you can be a sous chef here. Within a week, they hired somebody else for the position that I was supposed to get. So my response was, I had volunteered to work overtime the next day, but my response after seeing that was, they got this new sous chef. They obviously don't need me. I mean, he can handle it, right? He knows what he's doing, because this guy had never even been in the kitchen I was in, never met anybody, anything. And again, that's my arrogance, my ego, my impulsivity reacting. So I didn't show up. I ate acid that day, and I got a call from my chef basically saying that I was fired. So that really ended a really good opportunity for me, but thankfully it did end that way. After that situation, one of the next things, I kind of just fell apart, and I began drinking heavier. There was an instance where I got drunk with a buddy. We were drinking whiskey in Vegas, and then we woke up on a rock, and we didn't know where we were at the time, but it would end up being Zion National Park. And in Zion National Park, there's mountain lions, all sorts of things. I mean, not to mention that I drove probably 5 hours away from Vegas without recollecting how I really got there. Coming back from there, we stopped at the Grand Canyon, the North Rim, and then leaving there, we went and got some beers, and we were smoking joints, and we got pulled over. I didn't get arrested at that time with the pot or the alcohol for whatever reason, but again, I had another experience with a cop. This was becoming a reoccurring theme that everywhere I went I would get arrested because of my own behavior. And the cop was nice. I mean, it wasn't like the experiences that I had with police when I was younger. He actually treated me like a person and with some dignity and respect, so I was able to respect him for those reasons. Because again, respect is reciprocated. It's not something you can command from somebody. It's something that they have to find in you, and it was a nice feeling. After Zion, I took up some other different jobs, and one of the jobs I worked at was Viaggio's in Las Vegas, and it had an open kitchen, and it had a big open window where you could see all of the Strip. So it was a pretty cool spot, being my age and doing those things. I remember drinking there one night after work, because lots of kitchens will give people free drinks or things like that when they're working, or when they're done working, rather. And I had probably 3 or 4 drinks, and I was driving home, singing a song, and I got pulled over by the police in Vegas. Well, this would be my first DUI, but I appreciated the way that the cop explained things to me. He said, I don't want to give you this DUI, but in this situation, I'm worried of you hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, which that was really, I mean, when he said that, you know, it made sense. And then he asked me if I had anything on him. I told him I had a bowl in my car. I gave him the bowl. He's like, I'm not even going to write you up for this. I'm going to let you, I don't want to cause more problems than you're already going to be in now. And I went to the jail in Las Vegas. I was only there for 2 days. So it really wasn't that bad of an experience. I mean, jail's not good for anybody, but I didn't have any animosity towards the officer in that situation. I understood why he had to do those things, thankfully. And in that time, there was another girl from back this area who moved out to Las Vegas to live with me, and her and I had another turbulent relationship. And when we broke up, I decided to leave Las Vegas and go to a different position. The issue was I never got a letter about my court date or anything for my first DUI. So then I had a warrant out, and I had a suspended license. And since I was driving out of Las Vegas and I was still doing drugs and drinking, I ended up getting a second DUI. But they're actually a DWI because it was pot in my system. I wasn't drinking alcohol when I got caught. But the thing that was difficult for me to understand in this situation, the cop said that I was a threat speeding, but he had to speed up and then do a U-turn in the middle of the highway to pull me over. So he put more people at risk than what I was doing in that situation, but it's somewhat irrelevant. It was difficult, though, to get a DUI when you have a suspended license and for another DUI and a warrant out for your arrest. Thankfully, I was able to get bailed out because I was going to Washington State to work at a summer camp as a head chef for disadvantaged teens and mentally disabled adults. And that was a good experience for the most part, but I had to drive 20-some hours from Jackpot, Nevada to Sultan, Washington without a license with 2 DUIs and all these other, so that was, it just shows you how reckless I was. Thankfully, I made it to the summer camp okay, and it was a good experience for the most part, up until the point when people with fetal alcohol syndrome wanted me to give their kids extra special attention, which now I understand that they were sick people and they hurt their children because of their addiction. But at the time, I was just under like the assumption of, wow, you really hurt these kids, but now you want me to do extra things because you couldn't quit drinking for 9 months. But I couldn't see how that played out in my own life, to where I couldn't quit doing what I was doing, and how many people I hurt, how many people I affected with my actions. And that ended up with me making myself homeless yet again, because I just quit the job and I just lived in my car at that time until one of my buddies was finished with the rest of the summer there. But at one point I drove my car there, and I was driving to a parking lot, and I got pulled over yet again by the police in Washington State this time. And I told the cop everything that was going on, everything about my situation, where I was coming from, and he gave me one of the most humane responses that I've ever had in some capacities, because he said, I understand everything you're going through. He's like, get to where you're going, park your car, and if I catch you again driving, you're gonna go to jail. I parked the car right there. I didn't drive, waited for my buddy to show up. We left, and we ended up going down the coast of Oregon to Northern California. I lived on the beach there for about 2 weeks. I would get harassed by the police there because I had a Dodge Charger that I had gotten in Las Vegas, but I hadn't made any payments on it, anything like that, but they didn't know that I didn't have any money. They just saw this Dodge Charger on the beach and some kid sleeping on the beach with his buddy, and they would try to ask me to go stay at a campground, this, that, or the other. They didn't understand I didn't have any money. And when I tried to go to a homeless shelter, I wouldn't go into the homeless shelter because they wanted me to take a breathalyzer every night. They wanted me to listen to a religion that I didn't believe in. So for me, it was much easier to sleep outside on baseball fields, on the beach, in the woods, than it was to do things that I didn't believe in or didn't support. I ended up leaving Cali, taking the Charger back to Vegas. Then I left Vegas, and I went back to Ohio. Then I went back to Vegas to try to work things out with the girlfriend. It didn't work out, and that was a really dark period in my life where I would just drink wine all the time and smoke weed, and I just fell apart. I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to die. That's really all that I felt at that time. Thankfully, I ended up going back to Ohio, started working again. I saved up money to move back to where I was at in Northern California, because it was probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever lived. The issue with that was the place I ended up working at was a bar, and I could drink all that I wanted. They had free concerts, excuse me, so I could get free beer at the free concerts. Northern California, as I'm sure some of you know, is like the pot capital of the U.S., so there was all sorts of pot there, to which it furthered my illness and my addiction, because everything was everybody else's fault. None of it was my fault, so I couldn't take responsibility for my own actions in many ways. And I ended up getting myself drunk one night because I was upset with a girl, and I quit my job. I told him that I was going to go to Costa Rica to smuggle in cocaine or something like that, which completely wasn't true. I was going to go work on a pot farm, and I went and worked on the farm, and it was an interesting experience. But after that experience, I went back to the job. They thankfully hired me back because I work hard and I'm good at what I do. And that worked out fine for a bit until I got really drunk and I got the sense to go somewhere else. And I went to the Florida Keys. And then in the Florida Keys, the place I worked at there, it was basically a type of serfdom where they had a restaurant, hotel, and then they had employee housing, and you paid for the employee housing, but you were working for them anyhow, so they were making money off you, and you were paying to live there, which to me, I couldn't understand how that worked. So I ended up quitting that job and made myself homeless yet again. And I went to live in Key West. I just got drunk all the time in Key West. I would have got arrested in Key West for skinny dipping with a lady friend, but they didn't want to give me the ticket because that was a rite of passage down there. So yet again, the cop was cool with me, but it was a different experience than what I had experienced. I ended up going back to California after that because everything fell apart in Key West because what they call the Keys disease, which is where you're drunk all the time, you don't do anything. After that, I went back to Cali. I got a little apartment. I ended up living with 2 people in a studio apartment because none of us wanted to do anything. We just wanted to sit around and smoke weed and drink all day. And that's really all we did for 2 months. After that, I had a couple run-ins with the cops in California. One time I was smoking weed outside of a bar. The officer came around the corner and they're like, "Cops are coming, put away your pipes." And sure enough, they came up and they caught me and they took my pipe. They emptied out the weed out of it and they said, "Does this have sentimental value to you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And they gave it back to me, which it was mind-blowing to me. Another experience was me smoking outside of a place I worked and a cop saying, "I know you guys have your 215 and this and that, but you're being idiots right now and you're disrespecting the law and you're disrespecting yourself and you're disrespecting other people." So I wasn't upset at this guy at all because he talked to me like a person and he talked to me and was informing me of different things that I wasn't aware of. I mean, it was a type of respect I haven't had. And one of my buddies got a DUI when I was in California, and it was a surreal experience for me when that happened because they didn't search me, pat me down, they didn't do anything to me. I just got to get out of the car and leave, and I was like, "You're not going to search me?" Because any other experience I had been in, even as a passenger, I was searched. Okay, that's fine. Okay. I'll skip the rest of those things that I was going to talk about. The main thing I just want to say is it's about respect and how you treat people, because I have ultimate respect for people that are respectful to me, and I have ultimate respect for all of you wanting to be out there and do those things. Just understand that the people in those situations are going through a lot of things. I want to read part of a poem to explain what psychosis is like, and then I'll close with the quote. Psychosis is one man gambling away the earth only to ante up the galaxy. Psychosis is thinking your soul will be extinguished. Psychosis is thinking everyone is against you. Psychosis is feeling like you're trapped in hell. Psychosis is imagining your family has never been real people, just alien actors intent on tormenting you. And these are things that I legitimately thought, which I didn't get to get my mental illness because I was a little bit too verbose, but those things all impacted me greatly. And the one thing I'll say with where I'm at now is I'm sober and I'm thankful for my sobriety and I'm thankful for this opportunity to speak to you. And people with mental illness are people just like you're people before you're police officers, and just remember that. And there's nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less, and that was said by Mary Curie. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. And just 1 second, Ross, that was great. Thanks. And Nathan, you had asked a question, and I mean, Pete answered it elaborately. I don't know if you realize that. Nathan was asked earlier, like, you know, what about if you're dealing with somebody that's just so negative towards the police because of everything going on or past experiences? And I mean, he summed it up. It's, you know, you've had some early experiences with the police that were kind of negative. They weren't respectful. You know, you kind of, and then later on, it seemed like you had some really positive experiences. And you know, and that's what was my answer. I think that when you respect somebody, no matter what their precognition are or their previous experiences, that you can always change somebody's attitude, at least maybe not to the whole police in general, but at least to you, and they'll be more compliant to that. And you know, it's,
thank you very much.
Thank you. And again,
I have a question for Ross.
What's up?
What brought you kind of like, this is how I'm going to say it, and I'll interpret it to you if you need it better. What brought you back to the light? What made you realize that, you know what I'm doing isn't the life that I want to lead anymore. This isn't who I want to be, and now going forward, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do, and project yourself in that way. Because I know, like you said, your family kind of like abandoned you, and you know they got divorced and all that. And that's a lot of times what I look back on when I struggle is, you know what, I have people that are watching me and looking at me for guidance, you know, how I lead my life. I want to exonerate that to the people around me and show them that, you know what, I'm a leader, but I can also help you in the time of need. That's kind of why I got here, but I want to see it from your perspective on the other end.
Honestly, for me, the thing that started getting me better was actually my illness, if that makes any sense, because I was so sick that I was at a point where I didn't know if, I thought I was going to die if I didn't take the medicine, and I thought the medicine was going to kill me anyhow. So I basically figured if I didn't start taking the medicine that I was going to die, so I said, what the hell. Thankfully I did that, and then progressively, as the medicine started working and I started going to therapy and all these different things started happening, I started having more respect for myself, and I was able to define what I wanted and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to act towards people. And to where I'm at now, with getting sober, I realized that with my experiences and me not being afraid to talk about them, I have the ability to help other people feel less uncomfortable about those situations. Because when I got out of the psych wards at different times, I never thought I was going to put my head back together. I always thought I was going to be out there, and I always thought I was going to be thinking people were chasing me and that kind of stuff. I'm just fortunate that I was just crazy enough to get uncrazy again. But I'm always going to be a little bit out there, but I like that about me. So.
Well, yeah, that's you, man.
Yeah, certainly.
And that's why I asked you that question, because I like your personality, and I can kind of see, like, you know, like you're saying, you were either going to take the pills or you weren't, and either way you felt like, you know, you were going to die, but at least with the pills, you kind of thought, you know what, there's a freaking chance there that I might live, so I'm going to take that chance, and I'm going to fight. So you answered my question. You hit the nail on the head. So I appreciate it.
That's a good question, man. Yeah, certainly. And honestly, when I did take the pills, I did die because the old me is not there anymore in lots of ways. So it was a really good question. I appreciate it.
I have a question for you, Ross. For the younger cadets in here that will become police officers, hopefully that's why that they're here. I'm a little bit older, so mental illness has, you know, run in my extended family, and I've had some suicides in my family probably like in the last 5 years. When you're encountering with people, is there any recommendations or anything that you can tell them to sort of maybe recommend them how to deal with them? Things to say, things not to say?
For me, it would be really just being compassionate, not talking in an authoritative tone, talking like you would to a family member in that situation, or like if you have children, like you would to your kid, because it all goes into fight or flight reflexes in those situations, especially for people who aren't rationally thinking. And fortunately for me, I've never been a fighter, as you can tell, but I was always just afraid of people, no matter what. But for lots of other people, they may react if they're not talked to in a calm way. It all just goes back to respect, and also how you treat other people is a reflection of you, not the person that you're treating that way. So I mean, if you want people to be good to you, you respect them, and if you want them to look at you a certain way, you have to look at them a certain way and look at them as a human. I mean, because for the longest time I generalized all police officers into one homogenous form, which was they're going to be abusive towards me, they're going to do everything they can to minimize my life, this, that, and the other thing. And the reality of it is individuals are like that, but those people were just them, and all of you are individuals, and you have the opportunity to present yourself however you want. And people always remember the little bad things you do more so than the lifetime of good before that. And I mean, no matter what happens, with my understanding now, I realize people are people, and people make mistakes, and it doesn't make them bad people. And that's one thing that I think everybody should remember too, that is a human beyond there. Just because they might be on drugs or they might be psychotic or those things, if people were healthy and they liked themselves and they were in a good place, they wouldn't want to be doing those things, because why would anybody want to feel like that and live like that by choice, I guess.
Thank you.
That was a good question too. Thank you.
Yeah, we've been here 4 hours yesterday and 4 hours so far today, and I think you just summed up everything that I said. We've been going over. It's that kind of hit the nail on the head. Just, I mean, show compassion. Don't talk down to people. Don't minimize their, the issues that they have. And it's, One of the other concerns is obviously, that fortunately you said you haven't been a fighter, but, would there be maybe some advice that if somebody might become aggressive to the police, how they might deal with that? I mean, would it probably be about the same, just kind of?
Honestly, with me not being aggressive, I honestly don't know. I've seen people get aggressive in different police stations. I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, the thing I have to do is really think before I react, but I'm not most of the time in a position where it could be life or death, so I'm not in a position to offer any advice because I haven't been there, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, rather.
Do you think you might have some insight as to what, might help avoid?
Well, part of my job now is I work at St. E's part-time, and I work in the emergency room, and I deal with Mercy Police, and we deal with people right off the street who are psychotic. And part of that is, your question is, there are just some times when that happens and there is nothing that you can do about it, but I think, then you get, what you can do about it is to develop your skill to realize this encounter is going south and we may need to, this may become physical. Because there are going to be some, just because things become physical doesn't mean that you have failed. It just means that it didn't work in that situation, okay? But the best thing to knowing, okay, this isn't going well, and then certain things will happen that as you get become more experienced, you realize this isn't going well, and then making that decision of, okay, somebody's going to get hurt here. This person is trying to hurt me. This person is trying to hurt other people, and then it's just like, okay, then you have to act and you have to do the best that you can at that point in time. So up to that point, showing as much compassion and as much respect, but also having that education that you get in here and that experience to know, okay, this is a point where we need to step in and control the situation. Because that's what society employs you to do at times, is to control situations. So I wouldn't feel bad about that, because there are times that you do have to do that, but to make sure that you've covered all the bases and been respectful and been compassionate, but okay, now we're to this point where we have to intervene. So, because there are going to be those points.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, Ross, we really appreciate this. This accomplished what bringing a panel in, that they hear from voices other than the instructor, that everything you guys have said, it really is back to what we've been learning.
I'd like you to also realize this was Ross's first speaking engagement of this type, and so this was a big step for him.
Awesome. Good. I really appreciate the opportunity as well, and I appreciate all of your attention for everything. Yeah, thank you.